I came home to find my garden flattened. All my flowers crushed. I knew who did it. He'd threatened me before. One more weed crosses that line, and I'll handle it myself. I didn't scream. I didn't knock. I started digging under the fence. I live in a small town in Indiana, not far from where I grew up. It's the kind of place where people wave when they drive by, and gossip travels faster than weather. I bought this house 5 years ago after my divorce. Quiet street, decent neighbors, just enough yard to feel like I had a little space. Tom moved in next door 2 years ago. Retired early, ex-military, very precise about his property line. The first time I met him, he looked me up and down and said, "Hope you don't let things get too wild on your side." I thought he was joking. I laughed. He didn't. That was our dynamic from day one. Me trying to be polite, him acting like my backyard was a threat to national security. He built a shed right up to the line, trimmed his bushes like he was in a contest, and stood outside almost every day just watching. He never smiled, never waved, just stared. I let it go. I figured some people are just like that. But he started getting petty. If one of my vines touched the fence, he'd cut it. If a leaf fell into his yard, he'd toss it back over, usually while I was outside. One time I was planting new bulbs and he muttered, "Hope you know your place." Then came the weed talk. He said it 3 times over 3 months. One more weed crosses that line, and I'll handle it myself. Like my backyard was some enemy border. I told him I'd do my best to keep things tidy. He just stared and walked off. That weekend, I re-edged the garden bed, pulled out anything that looked even a little wild. I wanted to be clear. I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just wanted my damn flowers. Then last Monday I came home from the clinic. It was almost 8 p.m. I was dead on my feet, hungry, exhausted, ready to sit on the porch with a cold drink. I dropped my keys in the bowl and stepped out back. And everything was wrecked. It wasn't wind. It wasn't a dog. This was personal. Someone had stomped straight through my flower beds. Not around. Not a little. Just straight through. Every step left a crater. Some of the tulips were still alive, just bent and crushed. My little marigolds, ones I started from seed, were nothing but a smear of yellow. Even the ceramic gnome my niece gave me for my birthday was shattered in half, face down in the dirt. I just stood there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. My jaw locked up. My heart started pounding. I looked over at the fence. Tom's yard was spotless, as usual. Lawn cut at a military angle. His porch light clicked on right then like he knew I was out there. I didn't need to see him to know it was him. I walked into the garage, grabbed my gardening trowel, came back, and dropped to my knees right by the fence line. The ground was soft from last week's rain. I started digging. Small hole. No plan. Just digging. Right under the fence. My hands were shaking, but I kept going. That night, I didn't sleep. The next morning, I left for work early. Tom was outside. He had his stupid windbreaker on, drinking coffee, watching like always. I didn't say a word. But that night, I came home and dug more. And I didn't stop there. I made the hole bigger every night after work. Bit by bit. I kept it shallow and narrow, just wide enough for what I had in mind. I was careful to cover it up with an old board and rake some leaves over it when I was done each night. From his side, it probably just looked like I was out there fiddling with the garden again. Nothing unusual. What he didn't know was that I wasn't just digging to make a point. I was setting him up. See, I'd noticed something 2 months earlier. Tom had this heavy metal rake. He always leaned against the fence when he was done using it. He'd rest it just so, one prong wedged between the boards to hold it upright. Well, twice now, I'd seen it fall over when a gust of wind blew through, and both times, he got irritated enough to mutter and come over to pick it up. And both times, he stepped right over the fence line without thinking. So that was my plan. Not revenge exactly, but a trap. I knew if I gave him just the right excuse, he'd step onto my property again, this time where the hole was. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted proof. Something I could take to the neighborhood board. Maybe even the cops. I was tired of feeling like the crazy one. So one Thursday, right before sunset, I made sure the hole was deep enough for someone to lose their footing. I propped a few sticks and weeds to make it look natural. And then I waited. The next morning, I clipped a few vines near the fence. Nothing major, just enough that a few would hang over the line. Then I left for work. When I came back that afternoon, I saw him standing out there, rake in hand, glaring at the vines. My heart was pounding. I stood at the kitchen window and watched. He muttered something to himself. Then he stepped forward, right where I wanted. I heard the thud. Then the yell. I walked outside fast, heart in my throat, hands shaking. But when I got to the fence, Tom was already pulling himself up, dirt all over his pants, red-faced and furious. "You dig a hole on purpose?" he shouted. "You trying to kill me, lady?"
I didn't say anything.
"Call the cops," he snapped. "You're done. You hear me? You're done." He stormed back to his house, limping a little, yelling as he went. I just stood there. My hands were filthy. My knees hurt. My mouth was dry. But inside, something shifted. Because now I knew he could lie. He didn't just want control over his yard. He wanted control over mine. And now I had to wonder, how far had he already gone? That's when I went back to the garage. I started checking the security cam footage. Just one camera above the garage door. I'd set it up mostly for porch deliveries. But it caught the side yard, too. I started scrubbing through the footage from the day my garden was crushed. It took about an hour to find it. There he was. 2:14 p.m. Tom, walking into my yard. No hesitation. Heavy boots. Holding something in his hand, looked like a shovel. And then he started walking through the garden. One slow step at a time, stomping as he went. I stared at the screen. I felt sick. He'd lied straight to my face. He tried to make me look like the problem. But now I had him. Only I didn't go to the board. And I didn't go to the cops. Because after watching that video 3 times, something else hit me. It wasn't just control he wanted. He hated me. And I didn't know why yet. But I was going to find out. I saved the footage to a flash drive and hid it inside a book on my shelf. I didn't trust online backups. I didn't trust anything at that point. For the next week, I didn't say a word to Tom. I just went about my days like nothing had changed. But I kept watching. I started paying closer attention to everything, his routines, his visitors, even what time he left the house and came back. And then I noticed something strange. Every Thursday around 11 a.m., Tom would leave for about 2 hours. No car in the driveway, no sounds from the backyard. Just gone. But then I started hearing noises behind my fence on those days, tools, hammering, something heavy moving. I waited until the next Thursday. Took a half day off work, stayed home. At exactly 11:08, he left, walked down the street, didn't take his car. That part made no sense, but I wasn't thinking about that just yet. Once I was sure he was gone, I walked into my backyard, grabbed the little stepladder from the shed, and climbed it to peek over the fence. And that's when I saw it. He'd built something behind the shed. It wasn't visible from his house, or mine unless you were standing right where I was. It looked like a small pen, wooden boards, thick, tall, nailed together. Inside were piles of what looked like burned brush. But the smell hit me next. Chemicals. Strong. Like paint thinner and fertilizer, and something else I couldn't place. I took a photo with my phone and climbed down fast. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking, what the hell is he doing back there? The next day, I called someone I knew from the clinic. Guy named Nate. He worked part-time with the fire department, used to be in code enforcement. I just said, "Can you check something out for me?" Quietly. He came by on Saturday pretending to visit. We had coffee in the kitchen while I showed him the pictures. He looked at them, and his face changed. "That's not legal," he said. "That looks like someone's mixing stuff they shouldn't be mixing." I asked what kind of stuff. He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Explosives. Or poison. Maybe both." I felt cold all over. "You need to report this," he said. But I didn't. Not yet. Because suddenly it made sense why he was so angry. Why he wanted me to stay away from that fence. why he snapped when I dug under it. I was close to something I wasn't supposed to see. So instead of going to the cops, I decided to go deeper. That next Thursday, I followed him. Left my house a minute after he walked down the street. I stayed far enough behind that he didn't see me. He walked like someone with a mission. Turned 3 blocks over. Went into a brick building with no sign out front. Just a side door. I stood across the street, pretending to look at my phone. 10 minutes later, a man came out. Same side door. I recognized him. He'd been by Tom's house a few weeks ago. Bald, stocky, drove a white pickup with no plates on the front. Something about him had put me on edge even then. Now I knew why. I didn't go back home right away. I waited, watched the door, watched the windows, tried to figure out what that building was. It looked empty, but there were people inside. And suddenly I realized, this wasn't about a garden. It never was. Tom was hiding something a lot bigger than a grudge. And somehow, I had stepped right into it. The next week, I played it cool, smiled at neighbors, watered what was left of my garden, acted like everything was back to normal. But I was watching everything. Tom didn't seem to know I'd followed him. He kept his Thursday routine the same.
Still no car.
Still disappearing on foot for about 2 hours. But now I was watching the shed too. I started noticing new patterns. Every Friday morning early, like 6 a.m., someone would stop by his house.
Och, grej sedan.
Same driver each time. I never saw them get out, but the car would park in front of his place for about 10 minutes, then drive off. And after those visits, Tom always looked on edge. Agitated. He'd pace in the backyard, talking to himself, chain-smoking. Something was getting to him. I was about to bring the video footage and photos to the cops when something else happened. Someone broke into my house. It was subtle. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was trashed. But I knew. The front door was locked when I got home from work, but the deadbolt was turned the wrong way. I always lock it from the inside, and it was flipped like someone had locked it leaving. My junk drawer in the kitchen was half open. My bedroom closet light was on, and I never turn it on. They didn't want anything. They were sending a message. I went straight to the backyard, pulled the flash drive from the book, and moved it to a safer place. Taped it behind the mirror in the bathroom. Then, I took another copy to a friend. Told her to hold it, no questions. That night, I sat in the dark, waiting. I was done being scared. Around 2:30 a.m., I saw movement outside. A flashlight beam sweeping the edge of my fence. Not Tom. Too thin, shorter. They weren't trying to break in.
Just checking something.
And then I remembered the hole I had dug. They were looking to see if I had gone under the fence again. That's when I knew for sure. This wasn't just about backyard boundaries. Tom and whoever he was working with had something hidden or buried back there, something they couldn't risk being discovered. And they thought I was getting too close. The next day, I did something I hadn't done since all this started. I walked over to Tom's yard. He was outside, sitting on his porch,
Smoking.
"You got a minute?" I asked. He looked at me like he wanted to spit. "Make it quick." I held up my phone. Showed him the photo of his footprints in my garden. Then the one of the burned pit behind his shed. "You want to tell me what this is about?" I asked, calm, low voice. His face went pale. "Be careful," he said. "You don't know what you're stepping into." And then he stood up and went inside. Didn't slam the door.
Didn't yell.
Just walked in like the conversation was over. But it wasn't over. Not even close. I haven't reported him. Not yet. I don't know if I'm waiting for more proof or if I'm just scared of what happens next. I still hear them behind the fence sometimes, late, moving things around. I keep the lights off and I listen. Every time I walk past my garden, I see what's left and I think. All this started over a few crushed flowers. But I don't think it ever really had anything to do with flowers. And I don't sleep much anymore because now I know what kind of things people hide right next door. And how quiet it is right before something breaks. The next week, I bought a cheap motion sensor camera and hid it under the bird feeder, aimed right at the back fence. I told myself it was just for safety. Truth was, I wanted to catch them in the act. I didn't tell anyone. Not even Nate. By Thursday, I had it set up and working. That afternoon, same as always, Tom left around 11. This time, I didn't follow him. I stayed home, out of sight, and waited. Nothing happened during the day, but at 2:46 a.m., the sensor went off. When I checked the footage in the morning, I felt my stomach drop.
2 men. Not Tom.
They came through his gate, no flashlights, walked straight to the shed, and pulled out a large black bin. The kind you'd use for tools or storage. They opened it, pulled out what looked like a canvas bag, long, heavy, and carried it to the far corner of the yard, right by where the burn pit was. Then they dug.
Fast.
Like they'd done it before. They buried the bag, smoothed the dirt, and left through the same gate.
No talking. No hyshetashchin.
The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. I stared at the footage for an hour, replaying it. I could see their faces. One of them had a scar under his eye. I didn't recognize them, but I knew someone would. This wasn't just paranoia anymore. This was something real. I copied the footage, took screenshots, saved everything twice. But I still didn't go to the police.
I don't know why.
Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the thought that if I went to them too soon, they'd ruin it and Tom would slip through. Or worse, he'd find out and I'd be the one who disappeared. That night, I sat in the backyard with the porch light off, just listening. And I realized something. Tom's not afraid of being caught. He's afraid of being watched. And that's what I've become, his shadow. The only question now is, how far is he willing to go to shut me up? Because I think he knows I'm watching. 3 days later, a note showed up in my mailbox.
No envelope.
Just a folded sheet of printer paper, slipped in between a flyer and a grocery ad. On it, in block letters, "This isn't your business. Stop while you still can." No name.
No signature.
Just that. I stood there holding it, my hand going numb. I looked around the street. Everything looked normal.
Kids on bikes.
A guy walking his dog. Tom's front curtains closed tight. I didn't report the note. I didn't show anyone. Instead, I put it in a Ziploc bag and hid it under the liner in my kitchen drawer. By that point, it wasn't about flowers. It wasn't even about Tom anymore. It was about whatever the hell he was involved in, and why they thought I was the problem. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the building Tom walked into every Thursday. The brick one with no sign. I hadn't gone back since I followed him the first time, but now I needed to know what was in there. So that Friday, I went back. I parked a block away, wore a hat, and kept my head down. Walked past it slow.
Still no sign.
No windows facing the street. Just a side door, same as before. But this time, the door was cracked open. I waited until no one was in sight, then stepped closer. Quiet. Careful. Inside, I could hear voices. Not arguing, talking. Like a meeting. I leaned closer. Next shipment's delayed. He says it's too hot right now. Because of her? A pause. Then she's watching. And she's not stupid. That's when I stepped back.
Fast.
Got to my car, drove straight home, hands shaking the whole way. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside made me flinch. I started locking every window, putting a chair under the doorknob, carrying my phone room to room. I knew too much. And they knew I knew. But here's the thing, I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because if I backed off now, I was as good as done. So the next morning I started writing everything down, times, dates, names, what I saw. I printed photos, labeled USB drives. I made a full folder and sealed it in a box. Then I left that box with a neighbor I trusted, just in case something happened. And right before I handed it over, I wrote one more line and taped it to the top. If I go missing, start here. And now, every time I look at that fence, I wonder if they're already planning the next move. Because something tells me they don't wait long. 2 nights later, I caught someone in my yard. It was just past midnight. I was in the kitchen with the lights off, sipping cold coffee, when I heard the gate click. Not slam.
Click.
I grabbed my phone, crawled to the back window, and peeked out through the blinds. A man stood in my garden, facing the house.
Not Tom.
He was wearing a hoodie. No flashlight. just standing there, breathing heavy, like he was deciding something. My heart was pounding so loud, I couldn't hear anything else. I hit record on my phone and kept watching. He didn't move for a long time. Then he reached into his jacket. That's when my motion sensor porch light snapped on. He froze, stared right at the window, right at me. Then he turned and walked out. Not ran.
Walked.
Like it wasn't over. Like he'd be back. I called Nate. I didn't even think about it this time. Told him everything.
The shed.
The men.
The bag.
The note. The guy in my yard. I sent him the video. All of it. He listened. Quiet the whole time. Then he said, "You need to leave." Leave? I said. "You think that's going to stop this?" "No," he said. "But staying might get you killed." That's when it finally hit me. This wasn't about getting justice anymore. This wasn't a story I was going to solve. It was survival. So I packed a bag, left my cat with a friend, booked a room an hour out of town under another name. I took the folder with me, the backups, the photos, the recordings. I left nothing behind. But I didn't run. I waited. And the night before I planned to hand it all over to the police, I got one last text. No name, no number, just 4 words. "You really want war?" And all I could think was, if I didn't already have it, what the hell have I been living in? I turned the phone off, sat there in the motel room with my back to the door, folder in my lap, thinking about how it all started, with a garden, a fence, a neighbor who didn't smile. And I realized I wasn't scared the way I used to be, not because I felt safe, but because I finally knew the truth. Whatever Tom's hiding, it's bigger than me. And if something happens, if I disappear, they'll say I should have minded my own business. But the thing is, I don't think it was ever just my business. I think they just never expected someone like me to notice. And now they don't know what I'll do next. Honestly, neither do I.